Hi, thanks, Amy. So my name is Cecilia. My pronouns are she and her. So I work with all of our very talented artists and guest curators who come into Angels Gate. So a year ago, Angels Gate Cultural Center opened a call for curatorial proposals. And we had a wonderful proposal by 4 curators for this exhibition, Borderline. And I'm going to let Naomi sort of take it from here. She is one of the co-curators. And take it away.
Thank you, Cecilia. Good evening and welcome, everyone. We're excited and I'm blessed to have you in this space. Tonight's occasion is the launch of the Borderline exhibition, and we're so excited. It's going to be a curator-led discussion with artists showing in this exhibition. And our rich panel includes artists Michael Chang, Joshua Toman, Sitwang Song, Allison Peck, Evelyn Contreras, and Christian Franzen, as well as our curators Masa Hararika, Mandy Palisic, who's also showing 2 of her works, Brandy Sostrom, and myself. As each panelist will be speaking and or presenting throughout the talk, we will each give a brief introduction about our work. And with that in mind, I'll go ahead and just give a more in-depth introduction of myself. My name is Naomi Stewart. I'm an LA-based curator, poet, and thinker, serving as a co-curator for the Borderline exhibition. My work embodies giving platforms to emerging artists focused on themes of storytelling, holistic healing, identity, and human persistence. I wanted to go ahead and thank Angels Gate Cultural Center for your collaboration and willingness to host this exhibition. We thank you for your work in creating space for artists and curators to tackle topics and stories such as the ones we discuss in Borderline. I also wanted to thank the artists who have participated in this exhibition for your making and your practice, for your time and craft. We thank those artists who have given their time to share with us tonight as well on our panel. I also wanted to thank our curators for the hours put in to create a moment and initiate a conversation addressing the concept of borderline as it relates to shared and distinct identities, art mediums, and the lived space we all inhabit. Given the time we are in, that which distinguishes and separates us has become increasingly gray, indefinite, and uncertain. Masa will dive deeper into this idea of uncertainty in relation to the borderline. But before that happens, I want to finally thank each of you here for coming, and thank you for engaging with the themes and work we're about to discuss. I invite you and encourage you to participate throughout the presentation to ask your questions, as we will be having a question and answer portion at the end. And without further ado, I'll pass the mic to Masa to introduce herself and the theme.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Mahsa Farhadikia, an LA-based independent curator, art critic, and a member of ICA USA. Tonight, I'm here as one of the co-curators of Borderline exhibition to discuss some of the main thematic frameworks of the exhibition. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a woman with long blonde hair, wearing a black jacket, and there's a green wall behind me. My curatorial interests include emerging and marginalized artists, contemporary art's dilemma, gender studies, post-colonial subjects, and contemporary curatorial approaches. The introduction I'm going to read to you tonight is an excerpt from an article I wrote for the exhibition catalog. You can find the main text in Borderline exhibition catalog available on Angels Gate Cultural Center website. Borderline exhibitions start with an ambiguous, playful metaphor. As inferred by its title, it plays with the references to a mental disorder of the same name, which, as defined by psychologists, occupies an in-between space in the spectrum of mental diseases. In its psychological definition, quote unquote, the term borderline originally came into use when clinicians thought of the person as being on border between having neurosis and psychosis, as people with a diagnosis of BPD experience elements of both, quote finish. Due to this definition, a borderline includes implications to an indeterminate and unsettled situation, as well as the social categorization, leading to hierarchization and stigma. Borderline exhibition questions the notion of a borderline as it associates to the notion of categorization. classification, and categorization are among the tools humans have used throughout the history to understand the world. Specifically, the exhibition questions the objective approaches dominant in the Western logic and their efforts to put the world as the subject of knowledge in order. The exhibition's theme is based on challenging the certainty, which is a result of drawing borders and defining categories, both in social contexts and in ontological ones. On a social level, categorization has been used to put people in groups such as members, non-members, insiders, and outsiders. As a result, drawing borders seem to be one of the most fundamental stages in the process of othering. Accordingly, what seems to be the harmless and even rational act of categorization has led to extreme demonization, xenophobia, homophobia, and other types of phobia. On an ontological level and inspired by scientific discoveries such as theory of relativity, the previously objective approaches toward categorization have been replaced by more subjective perspectives in contemporary thinking. In view of such a major scientific revolution, other areas of knowledge, including philosophy and art, have undergone fundamental discursive shifts as well. Accordingly, we live in an era that has emerged from the ruins of certainty and absolute beliefs. Postmodern mistrust in the meta-narratives of modernity, such as rationality and progress, along with more traditional grand narratives, is born out of the ideas of relativity and uncertainty. As a result, the legitimacy of putting concepts, people, and objects into discrete categories is being fiercely questioned by the naturally existing chaos and disorder of a universe, and its philosophical implications brought to the fore by contemporary discourses. The idea of an exhibition titled Borderline is shaped out of this philosophical and sociopolitical necessity to explore the subjective nature of predefined categories by raising questions about the nature of a borderline as a determinative element in creating spheres of meaning. However, choosing such a theme might raise questions such as, why do we need to bring into attention the importance of the blurriness and constructedness of the borderlines, the overlapping of territories, and the eclectic nature of realities if they already exist on various levels? The answer is that, despite the paradigmatic shifts, it seems that at least on the societal level, if not on a philosophical one, we are still prescribing skepticism towards certainty rather than describing it as our existing reality or portraying it as our lived experience. In fact, the borderlines outlining different social categories based on criteria such as gender, race, age, are surprisingly still among the most problematic realities of our time. Sorting people according to what are their common features has resulted not only in extreme superficiality, but also in hierarchizing of relations between the groups. Borderline exhibition also adopts the literary theory of intertextuality to explore the eclectic, multi-coded nature of phenomena. As Julia Kristeva, the Bulgarian French literary critic, defines it, intertextuality means each text is a mosaic of quotations. Any text is the absorption and transformation of another. While intertextuality has been mainly used for discussing the notions of influence and inspiration in art and literature, and consequently to address issues of authorship and plagiarism in these fields, borderline exhibition takes these concepts such as influence to address a whole different issue. In fact, the curatorial framework of the exhibition approaches intertextuality as a philosophical paradigm shift that undermines the borders between texts and exposes their eclectic, polyphonic nature. Thus, intertextuality in its very core delves into the structural relationships between texts and shows how each text is inherently made up of other texts, or in other words, how each text opens to, quote unquote, infinite play of relationships with other texts and semiosis, quote finished. Consequently, there is a close relationship between intertextuality as a literal theory and postmodernism. And the Borderline exhibition particularly aims to scrutinize the postmodern aspects of intertextuality, such as relationality, eclecticism, and interconnectedness of text, not in the context of literature, but as they apply to arts in terms of form, aesthetics, material, and concept. The exhibition contains 3 different and at the same time overlapping subthemes, namely identity, medium, and space. While we do not claim absolute comprehensiveness with these subthemes, we believe these are among the most critical areas on both artistic and societal levels, in which the function of borderlines has resulted in exclusivity, othering, and hierarchization. Works have been selected for this exhibition with an aim to raise questions about the either or, black, white, and in one word, dichotomic approaches. The installation of the exhibition itself is a metaphorical representation of the fragility, temporariness, constructedness, and arbitrariness of the borders between the categories it defines. Therefore, instead of installing the pieces in a traditional curatorial order, which means placing each piece in the space allocated to its respective subtheme, the pieces literally break into adjacent spaces. This irony is supposed to encourage viewers to question the certainty of thematic borders. This layout also creates a visual equivalent to the interconnectedness of territories and uncertainty of borderlines that define them. Moreover, by breaking the homogeneity of the categories that we have already defined for the viewers and disrupting their specified spots, we address the inherent, uncertain, and eclectic nature of conceptual spaces of the exhibition. In fact, the presence of a piece within the thematic section to which it did not originally belong is a visual allegory to the situation that Gerard Genet, the French literary theorist, defines as, quote, the actual presence of one text within another. Thank you so much. I pass the mic to Naomi to talk about the first subtheme.
Thank you, Masa. So I'm going to speak on our subtheme identity. So much of how we identify our sense of place in individual and collective being stems from these socially defined distinctions by motivation of the dominant group. As history shows, via economic, religious, and political motivations, they're used in defining and identifying individuals through these historic distinctions, mainly of race, ethnicity, gender identities, sexuality, ability, and nationalities. It is no secret that these distinctions have propagated and facilitated the othering, which is the alienating or differentiating between Black, Indigenous people of color, immigrants, LGBTQIA+ people, and so much more. Creating a borderline within the hierarchy and justifying the displacement, dislocation, exploitation, and has created a culture of poverty amongst these disenfranchised groups. These acts, as we've seen in 2020, have perpetuated an idea of normality, namely whiteness, namely Christian, straight, able-bodied, American in the US context, and anything otherwise having to assimilate or disintegrate, hostility against the other to maintain this normality. And so many of these historically and systemically disenfranchised groups having no choice but to reclaim and have had no choice but to reclaim and identify with these distinctions, deconstructing and redrawing the lines despite the systemic, physical, mental, and socioeconomic barriers they may face. The trauma of recent events, compounded with the intergenerational trauma that these groups have faced, has initiated this conversation, revealing the stories of resiliency, honesty, pain, and joy of the displaced. And so in this exhibition, we see this fluidity of identity in race, gender, sexuality, and mental physical wellness are explored by way of personal narrative, poetry and video, soft sculpture, and architectural sculpture. Selected works in this category engage in a dynamic dialogue that questions pre-existing distinctions in identity, questioning the structures that perpetuate these distinctions. The first piece I'll briefly discuss, and our artist is here tonight, but in interest of time, I'll speak on Dead Dreams Quilt. It's by artist Michael Chang, and he uses clothing fabric which accrued the wear and tear from the dogged pursuit of his dreams, art world class ascension. By revisiting this time through sewing and arranging the clothes he wore, Chang reflects on being an entry-level arts worker trying to wriggle his way into the good graces of gatekeepers and authority figures. Inflected in this journey is a growing ambivalence over the universalist aspirations of the art world that never quite matches the reality of its particular labor and employment practices. Chang reconsiders the formation of his identity up to that moment, and he reconsiders how the formation of his identity up to that moment duped him into accepting the conditions as a rites of passage into an unfamiliar and apotheosized social ecosystem. The quilt is a reminder that sometimes it's good for dreams to die, and perhaps it's time to wake up. The next piece that's featured in this exhibition is by artist Gazelle Samizé, and she created a handmade book called A Guest in a Ghost Home. She uses archival pigment prints, handmade paper, and thread to recount the narrative of Manzanar, California. In long surveilling of Muslim Americans and the threats of creating a Muslim registry, Samizé visited Manzanar, California, one of 10 Japanese American concentration camps. The landscape is ghosted by a history of oppressive tactics, from the extraction of the Paiute Indians, diversion of water to urban Los Angeles, and the then incarceration of Japanese Americans. It also evokes from the mountains to the white stones. There they are. It evokes from the mountains to the white stones, Samizé's birthplace of Afghanistan. In her video, My Shadow is a word writing itself. In her video, My Shadow is a word writing itself across time. She traces her shadow with the searching words of Afghan American poet Zahar Muradi, exploring this landscape of forgetting. The next piece we'll be discussing is by artist Joshua Toman, and we'll also discuss Si Twang Song, Mandy Palisic, and they are here on the panel to discuss their work. And so without further ado, we'll begin with Joshua Toman. So please introduce yourself and tell us more about your work.
Hi, everyone. Hi, friends. Thanks for coming.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joshua Toman. My pronouns are they, he. I'm an artist based in Long Beach, California. And for the past few months, I guess, I've really been thinking about how to combine the politics of queer nightlife and how to combine the politics of rest as a liberatory practice, and really combining those two things into work. And so in the sculpture that I'm presenting for the show, I recreated my bedroom door here in Long Beach out of a disco fabric. And so I really am thinking kind of about rest as kind of this kind of anti-capitalist, anti-white supremacy mode of being, and then taking elements from my kind of experiences or memories, kind of being in queer nightlife with friends, and really combining those two things to kind of begin to imagine what utopia might look like. I'm really inspired by the text by Jose Esteban Munoz, Cruising Utopia. And I'm really interested in this idea of queer futurity and the possibility of seeing a future, a radical, hopeful future in the kind of everyday life of queer people. And I think that, let's see, he describes utopia as a horizon. And so something that is always kind of in the distance, but not yet here. And I kind of liken it to a door. It's a door kind of infers that there's a larger structure that we can't yet see. So even though kind of in our 2020 life, there's so much hecticness, I really believe in kind of the future, and I'm trying to be really hopeful about a universal liberation for all. Let's see. So if you look closely on the door, you can see that there are these kind of pink satin moths adorning it. They also kind of are supposed to be kind of part bow, part moth. Obviously I work a lot in textiles, so a lot of the work has kind of adornments or decorations. I think a lot of my work kind of being a sort of self-portrait or another body. And so like this, I think of the sculpture as a other kind of body that can be adorned or decorated kind of like with accessories. And so I chose for this sculpture to do these kind of moth details. Similarly to how kind of moths flock to a flame, I was really thinking about queer bodies as people who kind of flock to the glow of the dance floor. Thinking of the disco ball as almost kind of this false moon that we kind of spend time and enjoy each other's company under. Let's see. Yeah, and for the moths, I was also thinking a lot about kind of fashion and just like seeing bows in kind of contemporary runway fashion. I was also thinking about kind of just like anime references to bows and kind of like taking multiple references and combining them into an object. So like I said, my work kind of thinking about rest, thinking about softness, thinking about queer nightlife is really coming from like an anti-capitalist, anti-white supremacy, anti-patriarchy lens. I think a lot of my work really is interested in that, kind of looking at socio-political, cultural structures and how to kind of push against those. Yeah, so that's kind of all the things I'm thinking about through this pandemic. So if people have questions, I guess we can answer them later, but that's kind of.
Yes, please don't forget to submit your questions and we'll have a question and answer portion. Thank you, Joshua, so much for sharing your work. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, thank you.
And the earring. I don't know if you all noticed. He has a disco.
Get into this gig.
Get into the gig.
Get into the gig.
Okay, thank you. And then next we'll have Seat Wen Song discuss her work, Call Me By My True Names. So she's ready.
Hello, thank you everyone for coming and the curators for putting this together, Angel's Gate. This is Call Me By My True Names is a work that I made in 2017. And I chose to show this work again in 2021 because of where we are situated in time and what has happened over the last year. And basically, it is a 3-channel video installation that explore meditation practice across different worldviews and communities and investigating the fluid space of care, healing, resilience, and resistance. Can I go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so it features practitioners who are involved in social justice and healing work, both on the cushion and beyond. And this work was started because of my own exploration. Like all my work is always like, I have a question, there's something I don't understand. And my art practice is there to try to seek an understanding. And I usually don't get a actual answer, but I get more ideas about it. So I was going through some difficult things in my life, and I decided to go on a 10-day meditation retreat. And while I was sitting and being quiet for 10 days, I started thinking, like, what does my liberation have to do with all that is happening around the world? Like poverty or inequality or police brutality. And very interestingly, the first thing that I was asked to read for this, group called At Land's Edge, after I came out of the retreat was actually this book called Radical Dharma by Reverend Angel Kyodo Williams, who is in the middle the slide. And she talks about how meditation allows us to investigate with attentiveness to the circumstances of our own mind, and also prepare us for the discomfort of confronting the obscurations of society we are individual expressions of. So that really struck me, because it felt like serendipitous that I was thinking about that. And then the first thing I was asked to read was the introduction of this book. And so I started this project, and I went and invited myself to different meditation circles, meditation practice, and spoke to different people. And I especially was looking for communities that are often not represented in terms of their inward practice, spiritual practice, and also people who are concurrently working on social justice work off the cushion. So, so going back to the previous slide, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No worries.
So the previous slide. So for example, I filmed, on the top image is Anne Finger, who is a disability activist. And for her, meditation is not about dealing with her disability, but more like, I'm impatient, I need to cross the road fast, so I'm learning how to, manage my patience. And I was fortunate enough that Reverend Angel agreed to allow me to interview and film her. So I went up to Oakland and filmed her, and she was sitting there. I thought we were going to film for 10 minutes, but she was there for 45 minutes. So in a way, I got my own meditation at that time. And the third person is Harry Williams. He is a water rights activist. And for him, his idea of meditation is to walk in nature. So it doesn't, in terms of these mindfulness and meditation practice is really different across different culture and different belief system or communities. And for Harry, he has been working a lot on water rights issue. And this is in the image around where he lives is the water that comes to LA, or now some of the water that comes to LA in Owens Valley. So so through the process of making the video installation, I was able to kind of get a much broader sense of various practices. And I know now the galleries are closed, but ideally, like this, the installation is presented in a way that is kind of creates it's like hopefully a safe and quiet space for us to get into, to look inwards. And it's 30 minutes long, and the installation, the video goes slower towards the end. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And yes, you can view her video, Call Me by My True Names, in the virtual gallery. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, the one thing, if you're watching the video, just try to put on a headphone and, remove your phone. Yeah, just try to watch it, on its own, if possible. Thank you.
And with that, we'll go on to Mandy Palisic to discuss her sculptural piece called Erosion, Noun Feminine.
Hi, my name is Mandy. I'm a practicing architect, artist, and writer here in Los Angeles. My installation, titled Erosion, Noun Feminine, is inspired by my work as a female architect in a male-dominated industry. The work explores the constructs and manipulation of gender binaries through classifications of form and function, as explored in the concept of a garden paver. Pavers in the act of paving are historically tied to ancient Roman colonialism. Exploiting slave labor, pavers were used to engineer an infrastructure for battle. By their very nature, pavers create a tension relationship with the natural landscape. Land is appropriated, then manipulated to conform to an imposed order. This tension is visually revealed between the cracks bordering these hefty, often stone or concrete rigid pavers, where you see the suppressed earth kind of oozing out from below the weighted forms that are carved into the earth. So the act of paving is translated as a form of masculine dominance over the earth. On the contrary, a controversial gender construct in itself, the earth, under the classification of Mother Nature, has been linked to feminine identity through associations of fertility and organic curved forms. This canonical relation presents social issues of oppression and power, as both women and nature are often categorized as vulnerable, exploitable, and manipulable. In regards to function, feminine associations of ornamentation stem from historic reference to domesticity. It was really through the birth of modernism, and particularly modern design, that these gender-based classifications became evident. And this movement dismissed the use of ornamentation, where, again, quote unquote, feminine additions such as curtains or other home decor items that would soften the rigidity of modern architecture were dismissed as superficial. But what's intriguing to me about the garden paver in particular is its dual function as both utilitarian and ornamental. As such, my work investigates a reversal of these prescribed gender binaries. Inspired by the act of erosion, which is Mother Nature's powerful force to sculpt and control her own land formations, the work aims to restore the paver's tension relationship with the earth. Working in the unforgiving medium of concrete, I have carved the rigid massing of traditional square paver design using organic and curved reveals inspired by topographical land formations and female reproductive organs to erode the concrete. Each paver form was created using layers of recycled cardboard, which I hand cut and stacked to create this terrain. A thin membrane of plastic was draped onto the forms prior to pouring, which allowed the concrete to set in these pillowy, hammock-like edges, so that when it cured, it was a soft, plush contour, despite being a rigid concrete material. The black hue of the pavers represents power and depth. It absorbs all light, all color, and heat. And lastly, as a gesture of healing, I have used the moss, which is one of the most resilient living organisms found in nature, to stitch together the contours and to mend it with the earth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mandy, and for all the artists for sharing. And at this time, I'll pass it off to Brandy to discuss art medium in the context of Borderline.
Hello, thank you, Naomi. Hello, my name is Brandy Sostrom. I'm an independent curator and art historian living and working in Los Angeles and one of the co-curators of this exhibition. My curatorial interests lie with artist-run projects, emerging artists, internet art, and virtual realms. Many artists have challenged the broad categorizations of art mediums, such as painting, sculpture, drawing, and printmaking, and pointed to the areas of overlap between these categories. Beginning with the French Academy and their creation of a hierarchy of painting genres, from history to still life painting, to the objection of what defines an art material with the establishment of the ready-made by Marcel Duchamp, and further with the collapse of high art and low art with postmodernist artists like Andy Warhol, artists have pushed and challenged these delineations. These categories continue to be blurred by contemporary artists as media technologies and the internet have once again challenged these definitions. Some artists have transformed their homes into studio spaces with the onset of the pandemic, as access to equipment in studios and foundries were not available, as well as funds to support these spaces and purchasing materials. Artists have adapted their practices to materials that are easily available. How have the materiality of objects help us navigate this destabilizing period? How does one art medium inform another and create a dialogue within the work and point to large issues in the world? The breakdown of borderlines will further be explored and demonstrated through the works of Jana Avner, Evelyn Contreras, Rochelle Gribble, and Gottfried Hayter, as their works live in a space of ambiguity, and by doing so, they challenge traditional art classifications and the ways in which mediums are used. The artworks in this section explore the concept of borderline, not only through the representation of the subject matter, but also through ambiguous choices of aesthetical tools such as style, visual language, and medium. These explorations liberate conceptual associations of material, form, and aesthetic through the works that move delicately and ambiguously in the fields of science, architecture, mathematics, and engineering, among others. Appropriating unconventional media, such as found objects, digital renderings, electronics, and even spider webs, these works embrace the transitioning dynamic of contemporary art as borderline that resonates on a universal scale. First, I would like to turn it over to artist Evelyn Contreras to speak further about her work, Suspension, and then I will speak briefly about the work of Jana Avner and Gottfried Hayter. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am really excited to be here, and I can't stress enough how much I appreciate all you coming in and seeing us talk. So I'm Evelyn Contreras. I'm a California native artist. My work tends to deal with analog and digital methodologies to create cinematic and surreal experiences through light, form, and space. In terms of the work I made for this show, Suspension, 2020 has been kind of this, how could I say, smoke and mirrors situation. And I was really interested in exploring perspective. And so in that language, I started really looking at old Victorian illusionistic toys and looking at the concept of smoke and mirrors. And in the process of that, I created Suspension, which is a piece that plays with this idea of illusionism within Victorian toys. So looking at like kaleidoscopes and 3D kaleidoscopes and how we really try to like deconstruct them, and we kind of project our illusionistic understanding on them. So I was looking at kaleidoscopes, and I decided I was going to do my own 3D kaleidoscope. And I was really interested in like this idea of like, okay, here I am designing this thing, but like, where is the design and where is the artwork me, and like, where is this nice gray area come from? And so I was really interested in that exploration. So this piece also has like these pattern shapes that also mimic water, and they kind of delve into this ambiguous form where you're still trying to lock them into something, but you can't. And I really am a fan of playing with that kind of aesthetic. With the whole 2020 situation happening, I started doing a lot more GIFs. GIFs, I mean GIFs. GIF is how you pronounce it in reality, just a little fun fact. So inside the 3D kaleidoscope is a GIF projected in there, which is reflecting within inside it, creating like another illusionistic space within mass. So I think there's this interesting play of like the actual artwork itself, but also the mirror itself starts creating an illusion and a space that is completely different. And I think it felt so in spirit of this year of just never really sure where you're at in things and having a level of uncertainty that I think really informed the form of this piece. So thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn, for sharing your work. I'm now going to be speaking briefly about Jana Avner's works. She has two pieces in the show: Enter a Virtual Reality Study, Repixelation and Blurriness 1 and 2. Both employ reflective materials such as interference paint and refraction gradients to imitate the glow of computer screens with earth tones to play with the viewer's perception of depth. Utilizing painting techniques such as glazing and scumbling, as well as expressionistic brushwork, artist Jana Avner seeks to progress the tradition of oil painting to reflect technological and cultural change. For Enter a Virtual Reality Study 1, Abner created a diptych with the left canvas depicting large, burnt orange brushstrokes in a circular motion as silver spray paint and holographic pigment emerge in contrast to the right, where the silver spray paint covers almost the entire canvas with the orange strips emerging from underneath. The scale and the tonal range draws the viewer into the piece, and the work begins to evoke a digital space, much like the glowing screen of your computer. Next slide, please, Naomi. Abner creates tension in the work by combining orange earth tones with the holographic pigment. In contrast to the diptych, the layers of Enter a Virtual Reality Study 2 are transparent, highlighting the holographic pigment, oil paint, spray paint, and resin. A grid-like structure subtly emerges from the canvas, acting as a nod to both the history of painting and computer graphics. In this presentation, you can't see this, but in the gallery, this piece is situated next to a grid-like window. So the light refracts off the piece and the canvas itself emits light. Artist Gottfried Hayter has 2 works in the exhibition, but today we'll briefly discuss Big Year, Big Pin. This work is a replica of a Pecky pin. Pecky is Amazon's map. The freestanding sculpture is roughly a 3 feet tall green figure wearing blue shorts. His muscles are flexing as he carries an Amazon box overhead marked heavy. Hayter explores the imaginary of the reward system Amazon has implemented with its warehouse workers through their creation of Pecky pins. The pins are mementos given to workers as a mark of different occasions or goals they have reached, such as working on Prime Day, working on holidays, and for reaching packaging achievements. This work is part of a larger body of work and research around Amazon and their practices, unpacking the inner workings of this system. Hayter transforms the scale and context of the pin, and the figure confronts the viewer with an Amazon arrow frown. The Hulk-like figure highlights the labor demands of working in these warehouses. The title refers to the essential role Amazon warehouse workers undoubtedly fulfilled during the COVID-19 pandemic. From March 12th to October 13th, 2020, Jeff Bezos' net worth increased by 80% to $203 billion. This again references the theme of reward, highlighting the company's record high market valuation and Bezos' net worth increase. Thank you. At this time, I would like to pass it on to my colleague, Mandy Pulaski.
Okay, so our last sub-theme for exploration is space. Borderline is inherently a spatially dissonant term that defines a boundary or references proximity to prescribed boundaries. In noun form, a borderline is a finite demarcation that separates distinct adjacencies, A from B. We might think of a threshold leading from one space to the next, or even a geological fault splitting the Earth's surface in two. As an adjective, borderline signifies an intangible state of proximity to either side of its boundary. It's defined as a state of almost being. We are on the borderline of recovering from a global pandemic, fingers crossed. It is through awareness of the borderline's existence and its defined boundary that we come to appreciate the distinctions on either side. A concurrent group of work in the exhibit examines the uncertainty of the notion of space in the context of time, location, ownership, and migration. This line of work emphasizes the ambiguity of space and its ability to both linger and transcend between varying realms. For example, artist Michael Chang's installation work explores geographic and cultural borders through a collection of personal artifacts. Many are housed in worn cardboard boxes or moving shrines in which Michael has gathered from his migratory life between the various locations he calls home. I will now turn it over to Michael to speak more about his piece, A Floating World.
Hi, I'm Michael. So Mandy kind of described briefly the project, but I guess this whole thing kind of started out with before the pandemic. Obviously, I was like moving around a lot. So during that time, I was accumulating a lot of stuff in moving boxes, and I have a tendency to not throw anything out. So during that time, I was accumulating all these boxes, and I was thinking about what I wanted to do with it. And from there, I kind of, from that anxiety of not having like a permanent place to live, I started thinking about like how I can memorialize or create an archive out of all of my possessions. And I basically used two strategies to do that. The first one was museum grade framing. So I used to work at a framing shop, so I have like background knowledge in this, but museum grade framing is typically what they want to use so they can preserve what's ever inside of it. But instead of putting in something precious or like an artwork that's really expensive, I decided to put inside all of this like detritus and ephemera I accumulated over time. So in that frame, Mandy, can we move to the close-up shot? Is it the next slide? Yeah. So in that frame, basically, is just a collage I made using all this stuff I've accumulated over time. So there's a little photo of me from when I was a kid, some notes, and then the other photo on the right is basically one I took whenever I go to Taiwan. I take a lot of photos, so that's a printout from Taiwan. And then basically I take all this stuff which has little to no value, and I wanted to like put it in these really expensive frames to preserve them. And that's kind of like the first strategy I thought about for memorializing. And the second one with the boxes is they are all containing my possessions, and I have about like 10 to 20 of them in different places. But by labeling out them as artworks, I found that my hypothesis is that by making them artworks, that's like the best form of protection they can have, because then they become like these like ambiguous, precious objects that aren't supposed to be touched or destroyed and anything like that. And I wanted to just like put them in the gallery and use basically any show opportunity I get to put these boxes in gallery spaces, and then use the exhibition time as like a period of storage for these boxes. So for this group show, I put 4 of the boxes in, and I just called them moving shrines because of the how I installed them, and that's all inspired by this little Buddhist shrine I saw at a banh mi shop, which was like under the counter, and it was like very low to the ground. So I just decided to sort of mimic that formal quality in these things.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael. So back to our theme of space. Despite its elusive reference, space by its very definition implies a designation. A volume of space can be described as geographic or physical, a container such as walls that border a room or an entire country. Space can also be a measure of distance, such as this COVID-inspired 6-foot public separation bubble that we've all become accustomed to, or even time-based, such as light years. Artist Julian Lombardi's abstract paintings explore the borderline between visual arts and data science. Inspired by the mechanics of machines to gather and organize information, the rhythmic and repetitive brushstrokes derive a chaotic yet synced mesh of positive and negative space on the canvas. Likewise, in her work Disintegration, artist Alison Peck investigates the erasure of socio-geographic borders through the act of negating the length of the US-Mexico border wall. The resulting scaled sculptures symbolize reintegration of the borderland. I will now turn it over to Alison to speak more about her works Disintegration and Transmuting, The Quiet Will Speak, Movement X, and Movement O.
Thank you, Mandy. Thanks everyone for being here. So to start, I just want to touch on the medium of this piece. I've been working with ropes for a while now and thinking about them in the way that a rope is a line and an object, a gesture and a mass, kind of like it is and it isn't. So ropes for me have come to be to act as these stand-ins for unseen connections, forces, and linkages across space-time. In the past few years, I've been wrapping rope as a meditative practice, and this keeps becoming more spiritual and less abstract as time goes on. Recently, or actually it was probably a couple of years ago, I heard about the Wata, people indigenous to Kenya, hunter-gatherers that track animals and are immensely connected to place. They talk about the process of listening, understanding their surroundings on a deep level, and making these connections in terms of making ropes. So one thread of awareness and attention builds into stronger ropes over time. And the way they articulate this was important to hear, in part because spending dozens of hours wrapping rope, sometimes I would start to question that activity. Okay, so that's the background. And then when I heard about the Borderline show and concept, I immediately thought about the process of this process, the rope making and responding to the US southern border wall. I had been wanting to actually go there and make work, but couldn't due to pandemic. So I thought about what I could do from home, from a place of privileged safety. And because the wall is almost too much to understand rationally, it's kind of like a vast wounding of people and land and animals, a profane monument that we are continuously harming ourselves with. Okay, sorry. Right, so from the physical abuse of those imprisoned there to the psychological wounding that occurs for everyone else in the country. And it is similar, I think, to other horrific projects like oil pipelines or animal agriculture or drilling in natural reserves and, you know, everything that this country is built on in terms of usurping indigenous land and enslavement of populations. So, but there's like something particular. Actually, could you go back to the other slide? Thanks. Sorry, I'm wrapping this up. There's something really particular about the public presence of the border wall and the socio-political and ecological disaster that it encapsulates, and also its projections within discourse and within our overculture, our mainstream consciousness. So I wrote a binding spell. I started to like bridge my other ritual practices with my art practice. And the intent was to bind, to energetically tie each mile of the wall to an inch of the rope. And I wrapped and repeated the invocation to, intending to negate the energy of the wall and to initiate a physical retrieval, return, and relinquishing of the borderland back to a healthy state and its true land stewards, its true caretakers, to whatever extent possible. So for me, this piece exists in a space of radical imagination and futurism and a space of potentiality. Like maybe it is the thing it says it is, or it's not. I tend to think it resides in a more slippery space between the two. And it is part of my bigger project, which has to do with believing consciousness has agency outside of the human body. And so that's a good transition to the next two pieces I'd like to share with you. Great. Okay, so for these two pieces, I was thinking a lot about the collective, the state we're in, the transition we're living, and just to, you know, preface that by saying like I do have a particular positionality, and I'm using the word we as a shorthand for the collective human species, and speaking to a potential highest good for that group, not to diminish any individual or group experiences. So here with these two pieces, I incorporated movement, text, and video to create two ritual performances. And then I displayed the video stills on plexiglass boxes. So this is meant to echo a zoetrope or an analog moving image, almost like an analog GIF, through the sequence of 4 images. The performances use the archetypes and timing of the lunar cycles to design a spell for the collective. The new moon movement X on the left reflects shadow aspects that are present and need to be released and transmuted. And then the full moon O on the right embodies futurisms that seek to be birthed. So for example, movement X has statements like whiteness is mental disorder, white supremacy is terrorism. And on the right, there are phrases incorporated like sacred earth stewardship and sensitivity is a superpower. So I'm employing the new moon and full moon as symbols because they're not finite beginnings and endings, but more like two spaces or portals that feed into each other in an infinite cycle, hopefully more like a spiral, to talk about the way that we encounter these massive cyclical experiences like times of oppression and civil rights movements in response to those times. And that the hope is that we level up in some way each time we encounter them. These performances explore human time as malleable and subjective, kind of like an impressionable substance. And in my experience, a human energy body can act as a focal point between earth and astral spaces, between past and future planes of existence. At this moment, it seems the collective is experiencing a phase in which historical truths and future potentials are being revealed and compressed onto the present. So this project investigates the collapse of borders, the transmutation of timelines through movement, presence, energetic intention, and projection. Beginning with my actions, but not ending there, like using these images. The intention is to spark something in anyone that encounters them. So the intention and the focus is always on liberation, and I hope we succeed. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison. Space can also be described by abstract boundaries or designations spilling into socio-political territory. This notion of private versus public space, which begs question of ownership, equity, and democracy. Where does one space end and another begin? Artist and climate activist Ariel Maldonado's Quarantine Garden series questions the psychological boundary of real versus fake as implied by the imposed limitations of COVID-19. Ariel addresses the socioeconomic and spatial borders that have become exacerbated as a result of the pandemic by creating an accessible and sustainable alternative to the benefits of nature that we've all been enjoying during the pandemic through the lens of fake plants. Furthermore, Christian Franzen's Hazy Dream State works leave us to question, are the boundaries between space predetermined, or are they informed through our perception of the borderline? Using atmospheric perspective, symbolism, and nostalgic imagery, Christian creates a psychological space that lingers between past and present, dream and reality, physical and mental. I'll now turn it over to Christian to speak about his works, Heavy Between the Eyes and Heavy Glow.
Hi, yes. So this is a paint. Hi, my name is Christian. I'm an artist based in Los Angeles, California. And my work typically deals with these archetypal images and these perception of images in the world around us, primarily dealing with various groups of subcultures here in California. So this is a painting I did of these owls that are often found kind of in industrial parks and older kind of neighborhoods throughout Southern California that I spent a lot of time in as a child and kind of in my young adult life. I began to kind of see these owls as these kind of like watchers, and I felt like they kind of I developed a relationship with them, and I would see them on my daily commutes to work and or working on various jobs throughout the city. And they kind of began to reference these kind of like constant keepers of time in my life, and this kind of reminder that like time is always watching me, and I'm coexisting like and almost like racing time. So I finally was able to get my hands on one of these owls, and I had it in my studio for a while. This piece actually came first, which is a sculpture called Heavy Glow. And oftentimes in my practice, I am working on maybe one thing that then kind of transforms and grows into another thing. So with that being said, it like started in this sculptural form and then also resulted in the painting that you saw before. So I had one of these owls. I then cast it in cement because I was trying to kind of, this idea of this gaze of being like really heavy, this time being really heavy. So I cast them all in concrete, made a series of them, and then painted them with this idea of time and these kind of California sunset and sunrise gradients to kind of like mimic this like constant turning of time. And then I was working on them in the studio, and they were sitting constantly on the sawhorse drying. And then I found that it kind of was a great analogy for this idea of like labor and time. So that just kind of ended up being their final position. And then if you go back to the painting then became of one of those sculptures in process. And I was really thinking of this idea of an object having memory. The object is a constant reality, but then like you have memory or ideas that are personal to you surrounding this object. And it kind of creates this split duality of like the constant and kind of the dream, or the almost like false reality that surrounds the object. So with this painting, it's kind of dealing with that kind of split and the multitudes of your perception or my perception of this one object in a certain place, period, and a time. And yeah, thank you so much everyone for coming and listening, and appreciate it.
Thank you, Christian. So that wraps up our sub-themes of identity, medium, and space. We will now turn it over to our question and answer portion of the program, but please be sure to add any of your questions in the Q&A chat box below.
Thank you to my co-curators and all the artists this evening. Unfortunately, we were not able to discuss in detail every work or every artist in the show, so please check out our virtual exhibition on Angels Gate website, and the catalog that Masa has created is there as well. We do have 2 upcoming exhibitions. The first is January 27th, and that will be a virtual discussion with artist Son and curator Naomi, January 29th from 7 to 8 p.m. And then the second will be an artist lecture / workshop with Evelyn Contreras, February 27th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. So in the afternoon there. Thank you so much again. And now we'll turn over to questions, which we have a couple, but if you have more, please submit them to the Q&A below. All right. So the first one is directed at Naomi. Could you please speak further on culture and poverty?
Yes, I think that came from what you out there, Victoria Bryan. Yes, so when I mentioned culture of poverty, it's a term coined by Oscar Lewis, and essentially it's the symptoms of a system of oppression. And often, I know it's a little dicey to use, often used to validate these systems of oppression, saying, it's not because of your identity that we've prescribed to you that you are in this situation, or anything systemic that's happening to you. If you think of the term pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you find that these disenfranchised groups under these systems of oppression have this perpetual culture of poverty that they're inflicted on. And so it seems like inescapable, similar to Michael's quilt having to escape this dream, or fighting against the tension of what it means to be a success in America. I'm thinking in the American context, is kind of not a fair game if you think about it, given all of the barriers that are put up against one another. So that's what I was meaning when I mentioned culture of poverty there. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Naomi. The next question is, how did the curators find each other to develop a parallel and specific understanding of borderlines? I don't know.
Brandy, if you wanted to, answer.
I mean, yeah, I can. I don't know, Masa, do you want to speak to it?
I can, yeah, you go ahead and I can, yeah.
Okay. I mean, the way that we found each other is because we all had been accepted into a program at the Torrance Art Museum. And that's also how we started working with these artists as well. And I would really say that the theme itself kind of developed after discussions around their practices and what we were seeing as like similarities and what were the crossovers in their practices.
Yeah, I would like to add that, you know, we, from the very beginning, we were very aware of our thematic structure and framework. So we had this criteria to check our language, our wording, our, you know, selection of the works, and have these back and forth with the artists and with each other. So we could make sure that we are moving and within the framework and have this mutual understanding that what borderline is. Sometimes we had to discuss this a little bit more because, you know, it's very fluid. So we had these fruitful conversations all the time, especially when we had to write statements. So I think that was how we did that. I hope, yeah, that answered the question.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so the next question is directed for Michael. So those boxes are full of your stuff, question mark, anything you chose specifically or random?
Yeah, it's full of my stuff. Not everything is stuff that I use on a daily basis. Some of it is. So some of the boxes, they have like clothing. So basically how I did it was all the boxes have like more three-dimensional items. I know one of the boxes is like a lot of my dog's stuff in it that I don't use anymore. But inside the frames is all of like the 2D ephemera and stuff. So not in the frame you saw in the documentation, but there's another one that wasn't shown. There's like I like collecting business cards. So there's like a business card from a diner that I like going to. And I believe there's like another piece that's not in the show, but it has like my old health insurance ID in it. So it's just stuff like that, honestly. It's all like a bunch of, like a lot of it's trash basically that I don't use, but I want to keep for whatever reason that I don't feel comfortable throwing it out. My background is in collage, as you see with like my quilt. So I think with a lot of collage work and installation work, it's hard to throw things out because you never know when it's going to like come back into your life and become like material again that you can use. So that's another reason why I have so much stuff.
Excellent, thank you. The next question is directed towards Evelyn. I am seeing something that looks similar to a Rorschach test. Was that conscious at all during the process of creating the work?
Stephanie, you're not crazy. Sorry, I got a little bit flustered and I forgot to mention that. So definitely a Rorschach test is something that was definitely in my mind when I was creating the work. I am really interested in contradictions and things acting like other things. So like the Rorschach test, the form is there, but then it's also made out of wood and it's shaped as ink, but it's wood. So yes, you're completely right. It's there.
Great. All right. So the next question is for Allison. Can you speak to the significance of the differentiation in hues used in the wrappings of the rope in disintegration?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of it was intuitive, but focused on more natural materials and colors to sort of speak to like the ecological space that the wall occupies. And then I did a whole section that was incredibly detailed and, you know, like different colors repeating all the time. And then I decided I needed to cover that with this plastic, it's like that bright orange plastic caution tape almost. It's sort of like a construction tape. And that for me was maybe pointing to the man-made forces at work, you know, the really destructive impediments of the wall and how those are actually constructed in all these different ways. You can actually tour it online, like there are all these different sections of the wall and how it's manifested, like from those really tall metal structures that we see in photographs, or if you live in the region, to like in the swamps of Florida, you have these like weird metal X's. I forget what they're originally used for, but it's a lot of really haphazard material. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I was referencing and what I was thinking about as I was wrapping it. But it's also abstract, if that makes sense. Like it's not a one-to-one correlation. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. The next question is directed for at Joshua. Can you talk about the relationship between domestic and social spaces of intimacy you mentioned in your work? I'm curious about the implications of an object that references both your room and queer nightlife.
Yeah, that's something I was thinking a lot about, because I think of the door as a sort of like barrier or border. And I also am really interested in kind of this kind of privateness versus publicness. Yeah, because queer nightlife I think of as being like so kind of about community and kind of spending time with kind of chosen family. But then I think about a sort of solitude that my bedroom kind of allows for. So I think of this kind of like oscillating between kind of an individuality versus like a collectivity. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but those are kind of my thoughts on that sprung.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Christian. The title of your pieces both contain the adjective heavy. As these works are imbued with such light, this seems an interesting juxtaposition. What drove you to make this choice?
Yeah, I think for me, well, for the first piece of the Sculptures of the Owls, the pieces are like actually physically very heavy. So it was kind of a very literal use of the word heavy, but also this glow of the kind of skyline at sunrise and sunset that's painted on the owls. So it's this physical sensation of being heavy, but also this kind of like ephemeral sensation of, you know, this really beautiful, this just like a beautiful scene you get to see every morning and every evening. And then also the painting is entitled Heavy Behind the Eyes, also because it uses heavy kind of in a way of dealing with memory, or kind of this, but not in a negative way, in more of like an anchor of, it's kind of something that is consistent and always is there, and you always kind of revisit. So heavy behind the eyes, it's kind of like every time you close your eyes, you kind of revisit this place, or you kind of like replay this scene, or it's always revisited. So it's kind of a constant in that way, being heavy. So thank you for the question.
Thanks, Christian. Okay, we just got another one in for Joshua. Can you talk more about the decision of a soft door versus an actual door?
Yeah, my work kind of really consists of soft sculpture and like plush objects. So I'm really interested in kind of taking a physical softness or a kind of plushness and kind of using that as like a translation or metaphor towards an emotional softness. I think a lot about the kind of harm or violence that kind of heteronormative political structures can put on the body. And instead of kind of callousing against those structures of harm, I'm interested in a sort of radical softness that comes from those things. So in creating a plush object, I really want to move towards this kind of utopia or utopian idea with a really kind softness, gentleness, tenderness. So yeah, and I'm also really interested in the kind of physical or aesthetic quality of a plush object. I appreciate how it like slumps, how it leans, how it has a sort of weight that reminds me of a kind of body. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts and feelings about that. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Joshua.
Yes, thank you.
Don't have any further questions. I think we're going to share the virtual exhibit and turn it over to Cecilia.
Thank you so much, Brandy, Mandy, Naomi, Masa, and all of the artists who joined us today and dedicated their time. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, we had an open call a year ago, and through a very competitive and selective process, this proposal really stood out, and for good reason, and we are very happy to have it in the gallery and at Angels Gate. I just wanted to mention a few names while they're bringing up the virtual exhibit of people who were instrumental in putting on this exhibition at Angels Gate. I want to thank Perry Okamoto, who actually did this virtual tour. So this is currently live. It went live today on our website. And once you actually go to the landing page for the Borderline exhibition, you can actually make this full screen. And for us, this is just a fantastic way to ensure that even now in these times when we have to be especially careful, that we can still make this exhibit somewhat accessible and still have it exist in space and have the pieces work together in context and in relationship to each other in an actual physical gallery. So thank you, Perry Okamoto, for putting this amazing virtual tour together that's currently live on our website. We also had several people who really helped with the installation. Our preparator, Sarah Pilchman, our facilities manager, Carlos Gaveto, Dana August, who's actually on this tonight and who's been helping in the background in the chat. And then, of course, I want to make sure that I also mention the Department of Cultural Affairs, DCA, who is a sponsor of this exhibition. We couldn't have these exhibitions at Angels Gate without their support. So thank you everyone very much for joining us. Thank you so much to the curators. This was a fantastic exhibition. I want to do one more plug again to just remind everyone, a week from now we have another event on January 29th that does feature one of the artists currently in this show. Routine is Repertoire. I want to see if I can just quickly plug our website so everyone knows where to go. Please sign up for our newsletter. We will be sending announcements for that event. It's a week from today. And then later in February, on February 27th, we will have another event with yet another artist from the Borderline exhibition, Evelyn Contreras, who did the sculpture with the GIF that was part of it. She's going to lead a workshop slash lecture on the GIF, and that'll be very exciting. And more information for that event is yet to come. Routine is Repertoire a week from now. There is an Eventbrite similar to the registration for this opening. And then the one for our February event, that'll come later. So make sure you sign up for our newsletter on our website. And other than that, I want to thank everyone, all of the curators. We couldn't show art and artists without, our curators who really put in a lot of work to make this exhibition possible and bring these artists together. So thank you very much. And unless any of the curators have anything else to add, I hope everyone has a great night. All right, thank you so much, everyone. I hope you all have a good night. And again, please check out our website, check out the virtual exhibition. The catalog is also embedded on our website, and take care.